Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Sorry, guys. So what I'm saying is I have created an interface, string concat interface. I have a method sconcat which takes 2 strings and going to return 1 string. It doesn't specify what I am going to do, because interface means just providing the requirement, no implementation provided whatsoever. So whose duty is to implement the interface? I have to write a class which implements the interface. So in this implementation class, so you know, right, how to implement the interface. You have to write a class which implements. You have to use the implements keyword and then the interface, and this you have to override the definition provided in the interface. So I have overridden the sconcat. So here what I'm saying, simply the 2 strings which I got, I'm going to create a new string with s1 plus s2 that will concatenate s1 and s2, and it is going to return that. So this is my implementation class. Suppose if I want to test this, how I'm going to test this? Let us take this. Fine. So I have a reference variable which is declared with interface. You might already aware that an interface can take any class which implements the interface, right? Many of you know that. It is just like a superclass reference variable can hold any subclass which extends to the superclass. Sorry, 1 second. Let me mute everyone. Not sure from where. Okay. Rajesh, can you go on mute? Those who did not mute, can you go on mute?
I'm in silent only actually.
Okay, from somewhere I'm getting sound. Can you all go on mute unless you are asking a question? Okay. So I created a reference variable of interface type, and I have created an object of the class which implements the interface. So this class implements the interface, so I can assign that. Now, using the reference variable, I call the sconcat method, passing the 2 strings. Right now, who is providing the implementation for the interface? This class is providing the implementation. So I call that and taken in the value, and I have printed. Let us see. Run as Java application. So you understood, right? This is the general interface concept. Okay, after some time, what happened? The Java team told, why do you need to write all this stuff? Okay, you can use a simpler version to achieve the same. Now, you are writing a separate class for implementing the interface requirement, isn't it? Instead of writing a separate class, you can write the anonymous class which is going to provide the implementation. Anonymous class means it doesn't have any name, but it is going to provide the implementation. Let us see that, and then we will start the lambdas. See, the anonymous class is going to simplify what we have just discussed. If you see this anonymous class, now see, the way to write anonymous class is like this. Interface variable and reference variable I have declared. Then see, here I am creating an anonymous inner class and overriding the method in the interface. How to create the anonymous class? The syntax is something like this: new, and you have to specify the interface. But you might get doubt, in Java we can't instantiate interface, but here we are not actually creating the object for the interface. You can read something like this. You can say new anonymous class which implements. Even though this won't be here, but you can read something like this. You are not creating the object for the interface, but anonymous class means Java is going to create some class which implements this interface. It doesn't have any name. You just need to mention that you need to create that. Okay, how do you say that? To create an anonymous class, you have to simply say new and give the interface. One anonymous class is going to be created which implements this interface. That is the meaning of this, the syntax. Though it appears as if we are creating the object for this interface, but it is not. We are creating the object for the anonymous class which implements this interface. Okay. After that, you start open brace and close brace and put the semicolon. Here, once you write this syntax, automatically it gives you a suggestion. If you click here, it will ask you to add the unimplemented methods. Right? Is it easy or not? This is very easy than the previous version. Right? In the previous version, we have created a separate class to override the behavior that is coming from the interface. Right? In the interface, we don't have any implementation. And our implementation class, for that we have created a separate class and provided the implementation, isn't it? Here we are creating the anonymous class and we are implementing the requirement in the interface. Now how to test it? Is there any doubt here? This is the way to write the anonymous inner class. Okay, even in a method also you can write the anonymous inner class. Okay, the syntax is just different. That's it. The advantage is you don't need to create a separate class for implementing the interface. Right. Now, how to test? The same thing. The reference variable dot sconcat, you provided two strings, and see my implementation now going to convert the two strings passed into uppercase and returning that value. Right. After that, I have printed the returned value. And say, if you want to provide another implementation, now see, to the same reference variable intf, I have provided now another implementation. Now this implementation is converting to lowercase, the strings passed. Right? Now see, you can read it as new. I'm trying to create an object for the anonymous class which implements this interface. And here I have provided the implementation for the sconcat method, which is in the string concat interface. So how to test that? Reference variable dot sconcat, and you pass two values. Now the return value will be in lowercase. See, the first implementation, that means what? For the same interface, I have provided two implementation. This implementation is taking two strings and converting to uppercase, and this interface, sorry, this implementation is taking two strings and converting into lowercase. So this is called anonymous inner class. Okay. So what anonymous class has done is to simplify the process of creating the implementation class. Earlier, we have created a separate class. Now, we don't need to create a separate class. We can write in any method also. Okay, this has simplified. Now, the Java 8 comes into picture and it is saying, even this is very complex. I'm going to make it very easy with Lambdas concept. Fine. Before that, what we need to discuss, first thing, so today I'm going to cover all these topics. What is a functional interface? What is Lambda? How to create a Lambda expression? And Java has provided so many inbuilt functional interfaces. Out of that, we are going to discuss some of them, like predicate, consumer, function, and supplier. Before that, first we will discuss what is a functional interface. What is a functional interface? Okay, any interface with only one abstract method, right? Any interface with only one abstract method is a functional interface. Okay, you might have seen the annotation functional interface. If you add this annotation to the interface, it ensures that there is only one abstract method. If you try to define more than one, it is not going to allow. It will give you error. Okay. Clear, right? Functional interface means any interface with only one abstract method. That means it is providing some requirement through one method, and you have to write a class which implements that interface, or you can write anonymous class which implements. Now the Lambda came into picture. The Lambda is going to further simplify how we are going to provide the implementation. Any questions here so far? Hope it is clear. If you have doubts, stop me. Now we will discuss what is a Lambda. Lambda expression, Lambda is an expression. This expression is going to provide the implementation, for the functional interface. Implementation for functional interface. Okay. See, this expression is going to simply provide an implementation for the interface. Okay. So how to write this Lambda expression? The Lambda expression, if you see earlier for the sconcat in the implementation, what we did, we have written a class and which implements this sconcat, right? So this will take two arguments and it provides the implementation which returns a string. Now the Lambda expression, how it starts, if there are arguments, you have to provide it here, and you have to start the arrow syntax, and you have to, if there is only one line for the implementation, you don't need to put open brace and close brace. Okay, first I will show you. For the sconcat interface, suppose if using Lambda expression, if I want to provide the implementation, if you see this sconcat is taking two arguments, right? So you can start with Lambda expression with s1 comma s2. That means in the Lambda expression, the first part is arguments. If your implementation is having two arguments, just mention those arguments s1 comma s2. If you observe in the previous, we are specifying the data types, right? But in the Lambda, you don't need to inform that. Why? Because Java implicitly understands the types. After we write the examples, you will understand more. The Lambda expression is saying that you don't need to write all this stuff. It's not required. Just to tell the arguments that your method implementation is going to have. Okay, so we are having two arguments, takes two arguments. Then what it is returning? It is converting both strings to lowercase and simply returning that. So Lambda expression is saying that when you have one line, don't even need to specify open brace like this. It is not required. And return s1 plus s2. Okay. If you have one line, see at the end, we are just returning this one value. What Lambda is saying, if you have one line, one statement, not required, not required, not required. It is not mandatory. Okay. So how can we write this? We can simply say, s1 plus s2. See what it is doing. This is providing the implementation. See, in the first, we have written a separate class to implement the interface requirement, right? In sconcat, we have the sconcat is the method in the interface. We have overridden by writing a separate class. In the second step, we have written anonymous class, which is simplified further. this lambda expression, see, in one line, I am able to achieve the same thing. At the end, what we need to provide? We need to provide the implementation for the method in the interface, isn't it? So why do you need to write all this long code for providing the implementation? That is what our Java 8 Lambda expression is saying. Just tell me the arguments that the method is going to take and start with the arrow, and this is the method implementation, right? If you write a normal method, how do you write? Public string concat, okay, string s1 comma s2, okay, and you are saying return s1 plus s2. Lambda is saying, don't tell me all this, not required, not required, this is not required, data type is not required, okay, and return is also not required if one line is there. Why? Because see, to the functional, to any interface implement, if you see here, can you go on mute? I'm getting disturbance. Samik Acharya, can you go on mute, or Abhilash? I don't know who is that. See, for the interface, you are providing the implementation class and calling here, right? Java is saying here you can only provide the implementation. Guys, can you go
Anil,
on?
can you mute? Anil, can you mute all?
I'm not seeing that option. I'm not seeing that option. Guys, can you go on mute, please? Abhilash. Samik. I don't see.
Yes.
Can you go on mute?
Yes.
See, the lambda expression is saying you don't need to tell me all the steps. I know. See, because whenever you declare a reference variable and on the right side, you can provide only the implementation. You will either provide using the some implementation class you will provide, and in that implementation, you can write a method which implements the method in the interface. So Java is saying, I know by seeing this interface, I already know what is the method name, what is the data type that is going to be returned, how many arguments are going to be there, and what are the data types. So you don't need to explicitly specify all this information, just to concentrate on this part. This part I can find out from the interface itself. From the interface itself, it can understand the return types, the argument types, and method name. Don't write all that stuff. Even anonymous inner class concept is also simplified. Just tell me what are the arguments that your method takes and start with arrow, right? Start with arrow and just provide the implementation. Okay, see, this open brace and close brace, you will put it here also, but when you have multiple lines. Right now, we are simply concatenating the two strings and returning. So the open brace and close brace is not required, and return also not required. Okay, just the only difference what you are getting this part. You have to add this. This will tell you that after that, I am going to start the implementation for that method. Is it clear, guys? Now we will see the same sconcat how we can implement using lambda expression. So lambda expression is not at all tough. Just what you need to do, you have to check the interface which you are implementing. Say I want to implement string concat interface with an implementation class. We can do that using lambda expression. While writing that, just go to the method. I already told you Lambda's expression implements only functional interfaces. That means you know that there is going to be only one method. Just to go to that method, right? If there are two arguments, start the Lambda expression taking like this. So in parenthesis, specify the names of the arguments. You don't need to mention data type. Why? Because Java can understand automatically that those will be strings, because in the interface they are already defined. So it is an unnecessary information, right? Then you start with arrow symbol, and after that, if you have multiple statements, you put open brace and close brace, and in that you provide how you define the method implementation the same way you write here. Okay, now we will implement this sconcat interface using Lambda expression. So first thing what you need to check how many arguments there. So start with that and put the arrow symbol, and then start the implementation. If you have more than one, you have to start open brace, close brace, otherwise it is not mandatory. Okay, we'll check that. See how simple it is going to be now. I will declare interface reference variable lambda impl, and to the right side what I need to provide? I need to provide the implementation for the method which is defined in the interface. Either you can write a separate class and provide the implementation, or you can use the anonymous class, or now we are going to provide the implementation through Lambda expression. So how do we start? Check the interface. How many arguments are there? 2. So your implementation should have the same number of arguments, isn't it, while implementing? Okay, so start with some variable. You can give any name, S1, S2, and even you can specify this string and string, but it is not required. Java automatically understands these are string type. How does it understand? It checks the interface method. Since your Lambda expression is implementing this interface, obviously your arguments will be of type strings. That is why this information is not mandatory. Even if you provide, not an issue, but it's not required. Then what you have written earlier in the sconcat, you have in the implementation class, what did you write? Just you return this line. So now you provide the same thing in the Lambda expression after arrow. Okay, just to say S1 plus S2. How easy is that? If you compare with anonymous class and the first methodology where we have written a separate class, how simple is that? Very easy. Just in one line, you have provided the implementation for this interface. Now, how to test that? Use the reference variable lambda impl dot sconcat and just pass some 2 string arguments. I'm going to print that. This sconcat is going to give you the string, right? I'm going to print that. Right? Now I'm testing that. Is it working? I have passed 2 strings, and who is providing the implementation for the interface? In interface, if you open this interface, it just defined my requirement that it takes 2 strings and returns the string. But I never mentioned what it is going to do here. How did I provide the implementation? Through Lambda expression. No need to write a separate class or no need to write anonymous class now. Just to check the method in the interface. If it takes 2 values, means 2 arguments, you define them. And here you are going to provide the implementation of the method. So as I told you, these are not mandatory. Why? Because this part, what it is doing, it is providing the implementation for this interface sconcat method. So obviously Java can check these data types from here. Method, it understands from this method. That is why we are not writing all that stuff. That is why Lambdas has become very effective way of writing the implementation classes for the functional interface. Is it clear or any doubt? Any questions, guys? Hope it is clear. See, now if I want to provide a different implementation for the same interface, which returns me uppercase, then what you need to do in the implementation, make it to uppercase. That's it. Now see what happens. I will give everything small, but it still gets converted to lower uppercase. Right? I have to use this reference variable while calling. That means if you see the same interface here and here, but I have provided one implementation which concatenates and returns, but here using the lambda expression, I have provided a completely different implementation. This implementation is going to convert the two strings to uppercase, concatenates and return. Clear? See, now my implementation class which I have provided through the lambda expression is converting to uppercase as well as concatenating and returning it. Clear, guys? Any questions? If you don't have any questions, we will move to the inbuilt functional interfaces provided by Java. Hope it is clear. Okay. So simple thing. I will just reiterate how to write a lambda expression. Lambda expression. What is the purpose of lambda expression? Implementing functional interface. Okay. So say you have functional interface 1. Say you have functional interface 2. Okay. Now, if this lambda expression is going to implement this functional interface, first go to open this interface and check what is your method, how many arguments it is taking. Check how many arguments it is taking. So you start with that many number of arguments. If there is one argument, you specify S1. If you have multiple arguments, you will say S1, S2. You can give any names here, not an issue. Then you start with arrow syntax. In the method, how do you write? Open brace and close brace. In the same way, you can write here. You can say return S1 plus S2. But what lambda is saying, if you have just one line to return S1, S2, you don't need to specify this part, and this part. Just to mention S1 plus S2. But if you have more than one lines, this is mandatory. Open brace and close brace, and also return will be mandatory. So you can write when you have only one line in the method, you can simply say S1 plus S2. That's it. So tomorrow, now we will cover the functional interfaces which are provided by Java. There are 4 functional interfaces. First we will start with predicate. Okay, this predicate, if you open predicate API, predicate is a functional interface. We will see what interface, what is the interface, how does it look, and what is the method. Okay, if we take the predicate, we have test. Okay, now we will check how to implement this test. So if you see this, predicate is taking generic. Predicate is a generic interface. That means you need to pass whether you want to work with string or student or some employee. So that you need to specify. What is the method? We will take this part test, and it is taking, see, okay, the predicate, if you observe the syntax of the method test t and t, right? And what it is returning? Boolean, right? This is the Boolean. This is the predicate is the interface. It has a method. And now if I want to write a lambda expression for this, what I need to do? First, I told you how many arguments are there? 1. So you can start with some name, S1. Then implementation, you have to start after adding the arrow. And here, what my interface is saying, it will take something and it should return Boolean, right? While declaring predicate, since this is the generic interface, you need to specify what type you need to work with. Say student. Okay. Say P1 equals. So this lambda expression, what it is doing, it is providing the implementation for this test method. Test method should take t. T means what? Since I specified student here, so this argument, even though you did not specify, this will be treated as student. So I can call any method on the student using S1. S1 is a reference variable of type student. Why? How you know that this is a student? Because if you see the predicate interface, this is taking the t, and the same t is applied in the test method t. So whenever you pass student, so the test method will be treated as an argument of type student. Suppose if you pass predicate in angle brackets, if you specify employee, so it is as if you have specified employee reference variable in the test method. Okay. Now start the implementation. How do you start? Check the number of arguments. So there are only one argument. So you specified 1. And then you have to provide some Boolean condition to return true. What I will provide now? If there are multiple values, you can provide open brace, you can start open brace and close brace. Here I am saying if S1 dot get student ID is greater than 10, return true. Else false. Over. Okay, this is the implementation. Before that, I will show you example on predicate. Before that, I will show you what if you don't have predicate. Before having predicates, say I have a list of student objects. Okay. See, I have taken a list of students and I have added 5 student objects. And I have got a requirement saying that you need to create one list with student IDs less than 50 and another list with student IDs greater than or equal to 100. If you don't know predicate and if you have got this requirement, how do you define? You have to write a one method, right? Say filter 100 and filter 50. And you have to pass the list of students that needs to be filtered, and in this method you have to iterate each student object from the list, and you have to check the condition whether student ID is less than or equal to 50, and you are going to add that into one list and returning that list, right? Now there is one more requirement to filter the students IDs, only those students who are having greater than student ID 100. Now what you need to do, you are going to almost repeat the same logic, but this filter condition is going to be changed, right? Student dot get id. Now instead of less than or equal to 100, you are going to put greater than or equal to 100. So this is the way you would have done without predicates. Now if you observe, these two methods are almost same, just this part is different, right? Now instead of writing so many methods, tomorrow if you have got another requirement saying to filter only those students greater than student id 1000, now you need to write another method, right? Instead of that, what you can do, you can write a method which takes the predicate private static list student, okay, filter with lambda. I told you how to create the predicate. Predicate interface is generic type, so you need to pass, specify whether you are going to work with the student objects or employee. That is the way. Then you declare the reference variable. Okay, import predicate. Okay, now what we are going to do, I will create a list, empty list, and here see what I will do here. Just now, like earlier, I'm iterating, but now see what I will do. I don't use this condition. I will use predicate dot test. We have the test method in the predicate. Okay, and you have to pass st. Okay, now see, I will show you. I did not. 1 second. This should be open parenthesis. Okay, this has to return the list. Return list. Okay. Now, see, this method is now taking the predicate. I told you for predicate is an interface which has a method called test, right? Now, for this functional interface, I have to provide the implementation. How I need to provide? You have to write lambda expression which takes one argument, and you have to define some logic based on which either you are going to return true or false. See now what I will do. From the main method, I will call the method, this method, filter with lambda list student filter 50 list. Now you have to pass the list, which is our original list, the st list. You pass it, but now this time you are going to pass the lambda expression which implements the predicate. So what you will specify here, the predicate takes one argument and should return one boolean value, right? Now I will say s1 and provide the implementation here. So what I will say, if s1 dot one second, let me see the method. Filter with, okay, sorry, I have to define the list also to receive it. List student list. Right. Now I need to pass the list and predicate. So the test is the interface method in the functional interface predicate. So I have to start with that, which takes one argument. Then I am providing the implementation. I have to check the student ID, get student ID. If get ID is greater than less than or equal to 50, I will return true. Okay. You can separate like this. One second. You separate into separate lines, then it will be easy to understand. Else return false. Okay. Now the Lambda expression started here. You remove this. Let me format this. Okay. Now see what we are doing. Earlier we have written separate methods. Now instead of that, I have created a method filter lambda. One second, I gave wrong the reference variables. Okay. Now, if you observe this method, it is taking the predicate. Predicate is the functional interface. In predicate, we have the test method, right? Now you have to provide the implementation for that. I have already told you how to write the Lambda expression. Just to go to the functional interface for which we are providing the interface. Predicate, we have the test method. So test method is taking one argument. So I started with one argument. Then if you have more than one lines, you have to open brace and close brace, right? Then here you need to provide the logic, how to return the Boolean. If student ID is less than or equal to 50, you have to return true, else you have to return false, right? Now how to test that? Filter 50 list dot test. You have to call so what happens? This lambda is going to filter using the implementation you have provided. What is the implementation you have provided? In the test, we have the test method in the predicate interface. You have already passed the implementation. What is the implementation you passed? If student ID is less than or equal to 50, it will return true. So I have added to the filter list and it is going to send me return back the list. Now I have to iterate this. Okay, I will do the iteration and you can see the output. Filter 50. See, if you observe in the array of students, how many are less than or equal to 50? 1, and I think only 1, right? Yeah. Now we should get only 1. I will comment all this. Now see, I am filtering using lambda. See, now we have got only one object. How did it happen? You are providing the implementation through lambda expression and you are passing to the method which takes the predicate. Now, instead of writing another method, say I want to filter the student list with only those students having greater than or equal to 100. Now, you don't need to write a separate method. Simply use the same method but provide a different implementation. Wait. Now I will declare another reference variable which is going to take the students which are returned by the lambda Now see, I'm calling the same method now, but here I will just change the implementation greater than or equal to. That means you are not writing two methods now to filter. Earlier, if you don't have predicates, what you need to do, write for each requirement to filter, you have to write a separate method. That is cumbersome. Now, to the same requirement, this is a different requirement and this is a different requirement, but still we are calling the same method. Just what we are changing here, the implementation we are changing. How do you change this? Just you provide the implementation greater than or equal to 100. Right, now print out the lambda from the method which we have written. It filtered and returning one filtered list, isn't it? See, now you will get, I will add the system.out.println students with SID greater than or equal to 100. How many are greater than? 1, 2, 3. You should get 4. Mohan, Hari, Krishna, and Ram. Clear? Student ID greater than greater than or equal to 100, right? So you will get only this one, Mohan and Ram. You got it right? So what did we do here? I have written a method which takes the functional interface predicate. If you see predicate interface, we have the test. So test takes one argument and it should return Boolean. So that means you can use the predicate for a different kind of filtering. Okay. The same method, one time I passed the implementation which checks if student ID greater than or equal to 100. One time I passed it to the same predicate to find out or to filter the students which are less than or equal to 100. That means this predicate can take any implementation which you provide. See the implementation I told you, then go and check the interface which you are implementing. So since you are implementing the predicate, for predicate test method is there. In the test method, one argument is there. So you start with one argument, start arrow, and then if you have multiple lines, you have to start open brace and close brace, and you have to provide the logic to filter. So the basic concept is predicate takes something and it filters. Either it will return true or false. Is it clear, guys? The predicate. Any questions? Is it tough or is it okay to understand? Or at least can you ping in the chat? Have you understood or not? Is it clear? Shall I proceed to the another functional interface? If you have doubts, let me know. Otherwise, we will move to another interface. Once you understand this, writing the other three interfaces, functional interfaces, is not at all tough. Hope it is clear. Okay, thank you. Now we will start with another thing called consumer. See, for any functional interface, the implementation is provided through in Lambda expression. For writing Lambda expression, don't get confused. Simply go and check which interface you are trying to implement. Earlier, I have implemented predicate, and if I open the predicate, I have test method. Now I'm trying to, so now what you will start, you check this and how many arguments are there, start with that, put arrow operator and provide the implementation. In the same way, now we are going to implement consumer. The consumer is also a generic interface. We will open that, and it has a method called accept. So consumer, what it does, it takes some object and it does some action. it doesn't return anything. It doesn't return anything. If you observe, test is returning Boolean value. It should return Boolean value because the test interface is declared like that. But the accept method in the consumer does something and it doesn't return anything. So it takes something means the Lambda expression should start something like this: S1 implementation, and write your implementation whatever you want to. That's it. Over. Writing consumer is over. Consumer, there is a method called accept which takes one argument and it does some action and it doesn't return anything. Let us open the consumer interface. You will understand. Okay. See, this is the generic interface. That means you have to specify while creating the reference variable in the angle brackets, you have to specify whether you are going to pass student or employee or something else. So if you pass that type here, that will be substituted here. This is called type erasure process. This knowledge, this concept is in generics. Okay, this is nothing with Lambda. If you know generics, I don't need to explain this, but I'm just in case if anybody don't know, I'm just specifying what is a generic interface or a class. So the interface or class takes the type. If you provide student, then what happens? The compiler, if you pass string, it will put string here, string t. If you pass employee, this method, you can think that you have written a method like accept employee e. That means whatever the type you have passed to the interface, it will be substituted here at the compile time itself. This is done by compiler during the compile phase itself, not at the runtime. Java doesn't know that you have done all this process. Okay, now while declaring the consumer, if you specify employee here, the accept method is going to take employee reference variable. Now you can call in the implementation of this method, you can call any method on the employee object. Okay. Now we will see. I have the, so what is the first thing you need to do? Consumer has a method called accept, which takes one argument and it does something. So your Lambda expression start with one argument. Okay, now see, you have to write consumer. Since consumer is a generic interface, you have to specify what is the type. So I say student, then I will say con. I have created a reference variable. Then what is the accept method syntax? Check the API. So your Lambda expression, if it has one argument, how do you start? You have to take like this, S1. Now, how does Java know that this is the student? Because you are implementing the consumer interface. Obviously, this S1 will be treated. See, if you see the T, if you here you have a student, so this is student T. So obviously, the argument in the implementation class, it will take same argument. That is overriding, right? In the overriding, whatever the types you mentioned in the interface, in the implementation class also you use the same. If you want, you can specify the type here also, but it is not mandatory. Student, yes. If you are beginner, you can use it for your convenience. Then here, I started implementation. Then here, what I need to do? Some action. Sysout dot. I can say S1 dot get SID plus S1 dot get L F name plus S1 dot get L name. Over. Consumer is over. Now how to test? Con. Earlier we have used a test method in the predicate. If you remember, predicate has a test method. This is the predicate and you use the test method. But in the consumer, the method name is accept. You have to accept and you have to pass one student object. I will say new student 10 Dharmendra, and last time is say Kumar, just for now. What happens to the accept method? You have already provided the implementation. Whenever you call accept, this is the logic it does. It takes one student and it will simply print the student details. That's it, over. Run as Java application. Let me.
Is it
comment
mandatory
this.
to assign to consumer?
1 second. Let me run once. I will take your question. Let me comment these as well, so that there won't be no confusion. Yeah. 1 second. There is one more line somewhere. It's coming. Yes. Yeah. See, now you got the consumer. What it does, it is taking one student and just printing. So whatever the student you have passed, those details are printed using the accept method. Yeah, tell me, somebody asked the question.
And I was thinking, like, we are assigning it to consumer student, and then we are calling the accept, right? So
see, this is the interface, right?
Yeah.
And this is the implementation, right?
Yeah.
This is the implementation. What is the method in the consumer? Accept method. Now, whenever you call the accept method, this implementation is going to be used. What you are passing? One student object that is going to be received here, right? And you are just printing the sum action.
Oh, okay.
Clear,
So,
or any doubt?
Yeah, it's clear. But I was thinking, like, instead of assigning it, can we directly call the accept on this?
Here,
Yeah. Instead of doing that, left side as
without reference variable, how do you call? You can't call, right? You have to assign.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how do you call? You to
We
call the
cannot
method.
call directly.
See,
dot and all, right? Not
here.
Yeah.
Maybe you can call, but I didn't try. Let me check once.
Okay.
Because that, let me try right away. I never tried, but we will check this later. Yeah, I got your point. But generally, we assign some to the reference variable. See, even in the first example, you have said a new IMPL class, and then using the reference variable you call. Now, using the Lambda expression, you have provided the implementation, and you are using that reference variable to invoke that. I understand, but I will check it. Okay. Clear? Any questions here? Writing Lambda expression is dead easy if you understand what you are doing. Your Lambda expression is providing the implementation for this function interface. So you have to go to this API and check what you are trying to override accept. So this has one argument. So your Lambda expression should start with one argument. But you might get doubt, if I don't specify, how does Java know that S1 is of type student? Because you are providing the implementation, obviously you are overriding the method in the consumer, right? So what is the method here? T means whatever you pass. So if you declare the consumer with the student, that is student. So obviously you don't need to tell to Java what is the type here. That is why we don't need to specify. Even if you specify, no problem. If you are not feeling comfortable how S1 has become student, because that is, we are overriding. Overriding is nothing but whatever the types you have defined, the same method you are overriding. That means the argument types also should match. Clear? So this is the consumer. Now we will go to the another one. So we have checked the predicate. When we use the predicate has one method called test. It takes some object and it returns true or false. You have to write the implementation, how to return the boolean. In our case, when it is greater than student ID is greater than 50, we return true, otherwise we are false. In another method, in another implementation, we have provided if it is greater than or equal to 0, sorry, greater than or equal to 100, or if it is not greater than or equal to 100, we return false. And the second one we have seen is the consumer. Consumer accepts something, it does something, it doesn't return anything. Now the next thing, supplier. Okay, supplier. In supplier, we have a method. This is also let us open the supplier API. See, in interview, many companies are asking these things, write or explain the default functional interfaces. These are the functional interfaces we did not write. Java team has already provided. We are using that. Okay, they might ask you what are the functional interfaces, inbuilt functional interfaces. They might ask you to name some functional interfaces. You can tell all this: supplier, consumer, predicate. Okay, if you see, supplier is the generic interface. Then you need to pass, while creating the supplier reference variable, you have to pass the generic type also. If you pass employee here, now if you observe, what is the only method in the supplier? Get method. And does it take any argument? It's not taking any argument. So your lambda expression, if you don't, earlier in the two cases we have argument, so we started with argument. Now you don't have argument, remember this, and you are returning t. T means if you pass supplier employee, you should return employee object. If you create supplier student, this get method, whenever you call, you should return employee. Now we will see. So remember, it doesn't have or it doesn't take any arguments. Now I will create supplier. Supplier. I have to mention the type. I don't have employee object as a class. I am creating student only, using student only. Now see, so this student will be substituted here. That means what? My interface is saying, whenever you call the get method, it doesn't take anything, but it should return t. T means what did I specify? Student. So my get method should return student. Now see, student, let import control shift O, SUP. Fine. Reference variable. Now I am providing the implementation. But if you observe how to start with Lambda, check the interface and the method that we are overriding. Does it have any argument? No. So this argument list is empty. You have to just put open brace, close brace. Earlier we are declaring the variable name, but it is not required because the get method doesn't take anything. What is the purpose of supplier? To supply something. So it doesn't take anything. I'm saying new student. That means I need to create one student object and return it. New student 12 Hari Krishna. Over. Supplier is over, guys. Very simple. But you might get doubt. The get method should return t, right? But why you did not specify? That means I told you, if there is only one line, you don't need to write return. You should not write, not optional. You should not write if it is one. In case, if you want to write for the clarity, you can start open brace and end it like this. Right? If you, in case, if you are not feeling comfortable, you can write return, but you need to open brace and close brace. Here, return is mandatory now. Right? If you are writing in one line, it is not required. Now see, my implementation is not taking anything, any argument, but it should return. That is what my interface is saying, right? What my interface is saying, the requirement. The get method should not take anything and it should return t. So in my case, t is student. So in the implementation, I have to return student object. Over. Now I will take to one reference to st. I will call sup dot get. See, whenever you call the get method, this is written in the object. So that is why I have assigned to reference variable, and you can print it. Supplier, the purpose of supplier is to return something. Student ID is st dot get sid plus st get f name. Or so what we are going to return, whenever you call the get method, you are going to get one object. Clear? Accept doesn't return anything. That is why I did not assign. I simply call the method, and the accept has done the functionality of printing the student details. But here, my supplier.get method will return the student object. That is why I have to assign to one reference variable and printed the details. Fine, guys. Now the last one, the function interface. Function is a functional interface. Function. Until now, our interface is taking only one generic type. Now there are two. You need to pass t comma something. You can specify with any names. I am just going to check the API. Letters doesn't matter. Function API. This is the one other functional interface. See t comma 1. If you see the functional interface, now until now we are taking only one type. Now whenever you are creating function interface, you have to pass two types, like employee comma student, or string comma boolean, anything like that. That means what? T, that means my method is going to take t, and my method is going to return of type R. That means whenever you say student here and student and boolean value, that means if you see the method apply, that means what? This method is going to take student and return boolean. Suppose if you pass student and integer, then your apply method, you have to override such that it takes student and you write to logic to return some integer value. Maybe you can return student ID or something. That means what function interface, the purpose of this is to take two types, okay, to apply some logic and to return one result. Function takes one object, does some logic and returns a result of type R. That means if you pass student and boolean, that means this apply will take student object. You check some condition, like if student ID is greater than 10, then return true or false. That means you have specified boolean, right? So you have to return boolean value. If you specify student and integer here, then my apply function takes a t, that means student, and you return student ID, that will be integer, right? Why you need to return integer? Because you specified R as integer. That means based on the types you specified here, this apply function will work based on the types you mentioned. We will see two examples. Okay, now I will create function. Earlier we are passing only one because my interface is taking only one type. Now I have to specify student as well as a return type. What is the R means? What is my apply method going to return? What is the type for that? Whatever you specify here, that will be the type. Now I will say boolean for now. Declare some reference variable. FINTR equal to. Okay, why this is giving it? Okay, now whenever you want to start the Lambda expression, check which interface, which functional interface you are trying to implement. Function. So go to here. How many arguments are being taken? Start with that. So you start with So you can write like this, student S1, but this is not required. And then you start providing the implementation, put semicolon, don't forget here. And you have to return Boolean value, right? That means you write some logic to return Boolean value. If S1 dot get student ID is greater than or equal to 100, return true, else return false. Okay, fine. My function is over. That means this lambda expression, what it is doing, this lambda expression is providing the implementation for apply method in the functional interface function. Now, how to test this? FIMPL dot, you have to pass dot apply, you have to pass student, say new student 200 comma Raj Kumar. Now whenever you call the apply, the student, you can assume here, then what you are checking, if that student ID is greater than or equal to true, otherwise false. So my function is going to return Boolean value. Sys out. What it will be returned? It will return now true, because my student ID is 200. My implementation is saying that if my student ID is greater than 100, return true. So that is the purpose of specifying two types here. Why? The apply function takes one student object and returns the Boolean. That is what we are doing, right? So the purpose of specifying this is to specify what is the return type for my apply method. I will print run as Java application. See, true is being written. Now, if I change logic here to less than or equal to, it will return false. Right? You got false. Now we will do one more example, but this time to the same functional interface, I will pass two different types, student and integer. FIMPL2 is equal to, I have to, as you know, apply takes 1. So you start lambda expression with 1, saying S1. Then you start implementation. If there is only one line, braces and all that is not required. Put semicolon. Then if S1, no, you just see now what we specified for the function integer is the return type. You simply say return S1 dot get SID. That's it. So whenever you pass a student object, my function, when you call apply method passing one student object, it will simply give the student ID of the object. Now I will say sys out. How I need to test? FIMPL1 dot apply. Apply is the method in the interface, functional interface function. Now you need to pass some student 300. Now what it will return? This will simply return from the student object I passed. This I mentioned that my function is going to return integer. So I return integer only. Earlier, if you observe, I specified Boolean. That means to the function I have to specify two things: the object which I am going to pass, the type of the object, and the type of the object that is going to be returned from the function dot apply. Now see, it will simply return 300. Here 300. Hope it is clear. This is the function. So what we discussed, 4 things. Predicate is one functional interface. It has a called test. It returns Boolean. It should return Boolean. Here we don't have option. Consumer has a method accept. It takes one argument and does some action but doesn't return anything. Next, supplier. Supplier doesn't take any argument at all. Doesn't take any argument. Returns some value. What is the method for supplier? For consumer, it is accept. For supplier, it is get. For predicate, it is test. And the function you have to pass. So far, these interfaces are taking only T. Consumer T. Supplier T. But this takes T, R. Why R is important? It has an apply method. This apply method, what type it is going to return, we are going to specify here. In predicate, it will be always Boolean. In the supplier, the return type will be T. In the consumer, there is no return value. This T will be used for the accept method, like TA, some argument. So what we have checked, these are the 4 inbuilt function interfaces given by Java. This we can use to filter. If you want to write, if say you are passing some objects and if you want to print only some student IDs, use this predicate and call the test method. Say you are passing some object and you want to just print the details and you don't want to return anything, then use the consumer, call the accept. And whenever you call the supplier.get method, if you want some object to be returned, use the supplier. Function is like transforming, means this function takes something, does something on this and returns or. Or means if you specify Boolean, this function going to return Boolean. If you specify integer, your apply function should return integer. That means it takes something and gives some output. Okay, it applies some logic and provides some output. That output type also you can mention using or. That's it, guys, about the functional interfaces and lambdas. If you have any questions, please ask me.
Anil, can you share the code which you have written in the?
What?
Can you share the code which you have written for the
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Enter code in, take into the notepad and attach.
I will try to put in chat. I am not sure whether you are going to get. Otherwise, I will send it. Okay, I will put in the document and share it. Sorry?
Take it to notepad or any document and share it in the.
You are a part of that CSC Java group. From which, may I know your name?
My name is Rajesh.
Yeah, you can ping me. I will ping in the respective group. Okay.
In tutorials.
Yeah, I will ping you there. I will share in both groups the code. Fine. Any questions? Is it clear?
Anchor step tutorials in that one and
Yeah, I will share there. If you don't have any questions, I will wrap up the session.
yeah, no.
Okay. Hope it is useful. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. You can share the feedback in the groups. Thank you so much.